Level 989.
Welcome to 989 on Health, a show where you don't need years at university to understand the latest news about health and related subjects. As always, please remember we've created a bunch of links to more info on today's topic at our website, level989.com.
An important announcement for our listeners. This podcast is intended to be an informal tool for laymen and practitioners alike to hear our viewpoints on health and wellness. Don't rely on the information in this podcast as an alternative to medical advice from your doctor or other professional healthcare provider. For the full disclaimer, please see our website.
I'm Mike Davalos, just a guy, your average Joe, and I'm joined by the opposite of average, Brandon Weintraub, a primary care physician. Good morning, Brandon.
Good morning, Mike. I'm especially excited about today's episode and under the weather.
Oh, me too. As you could tell, this is not my normal voice. It might actually be a better voice than my normal voice, but I am sick.
I'm especially excited about today's episode.
I'll pretend I don't know and ask. Why is that?
It's because today we have a listener request episode.
After listening to our podcast, one of our listeners thought it might be helpful for everyone to get to see just what an acupuncture appointment might look like. It's surprising to me, but there's still people out there who have no idea what to expect if they decide to book an appointment with a complementary medicine practitioner such as yourself. I mean, it's the 21st century. Doesn't everyone know this stuff by now? Also, to be clear, by complementary, you probably mean in addition to, not free of charge.
Yes, complementary is definitely meant to describe the addition of acupuncture to your regular medical regimen and not intended to mean that it's free. It does seem a little surprising to me that some people still haven't experienced an acupuncture appointment. But I have seen firsthand how much good an acupuncture appointment can do for a patient. So a part of me just kind of assumes everyone's had a chance to try it and see how they feel about it. But acupuncture and numerous other complementary medicines are still gaining momentum here in the United States. So I think today's episode might help people who are a little nervous about booking their first appointment with an acupuncture physician.
I'm thinking the best way to talk about today's topic is to go through a virtual tour. Basically, walk everyone through an appointment from start to finish. Does that sound good?
Perfect. Fire away.
I'm probably going to start earlier in the process than you're expecting. We touched on this briefly in our first episode, but remind me, how do I even find a good acupuncture clinic in my area?
Well, there's a couple of different ways. First and best, of course, is just to ask your friends and coworkers. Every acupuncture physician has a different style of practice, and the best way to find an acupuncturist that will fit your preferences is through word of mouth. I do realize, though, that not everyone will have someone to get a recommendation from. So the next best option is to check the National Certification Commission's website. They have a search tool that can look through every accredited acupuncturist and provide a list of those nearest to you.
Okay. Now, I might be a little weird for having this habit, and I promise it applies to the topic, but before I go somewhere new and important like a new medical office, I check it out online. I look at Google Maps, I use Street View, Satellite View, kind of get a view of the area where I'm going, the lay of the land for my medical appointment. Is the office in a big building? Is there a parking structure? Is there street parking? Will I need change for a parking meter? That kind of thing. Where's the nearest Walgreens to the new medical office in case I'm picking up a prescription after the appointment? Is there a McDonald's or other fast food place nearby in case I need to use the bathroom before or after my appointment? I just really scope out the neighborhood before I go. I grew up in an era before smartphones, and while I carry an iPhone with me everywhere and can look this stuff up on the fly, if I'm going somewhere new, I try to do a bit of research first. Now, in the present day, in the US at least, I kind of see complementary medical offices like Eastern medical practitioners at the same level as a dentist, an optometrist, a chiropractor, or so on. You might not see it that way, but all of that was a long way of asking, what should I expect of the complementary medical office building or facility? I know it probably varies widely, but should I expect them to be in a hospital, a shopping center, a medical plaza? What's most likely?
Well, very few acupuncturists practice out of hospitals at this point. I have seen more and more holistic practices being implemented in hospitals, so it probably won't be too long before we're seeing an acupuncture practitioner or two in most hospitals. More likely, what you'll find is your acupuncturist will be practicing out of their own little building, not unlike most of the other practitioners you mentioned. Most practices will have a room or two and a waiting area, And I'm actually constantly surprised these days at the wide variety of office complexes and shopping centers that have an acupuncturist practicing there.
These days, people have become used to a fairly predictable pattern when they need to see a physician. First, you'll book an appointment weeks in advance, because if you don't, you run the risk of not being able to see your doctor for a very long time. The day of the appointment, you're told to make sure you arrive at least 15 minutes early at the office to fill out paperwork, update any forms, and then you wait. Unless you're very lucky, as the minutes pass and your appointment time flies by, I've waited an hour past my appointment time before they even call my name to get weighed and blood pressure checked. Now, is that what I should expect from my acupuncture physician as well?
I don't want to speak for all practitioners, but in my experience, you'll find a few differences with most acupuncturists. First of all, acupuncture works best and results last the longest if you have more frequent treatments. That means that while you do still want to book with your practitioner in advance, it isn't going to be a 3-month waiting period to see them again, especially not when you just start out seeing that practitioner. The goal is to work up to a point where you're seeing your practitioner once a month, or maybe every 3 to 6 months or so, but initially, you'll likely want to see them at least once a week.
I have to interrupt you here. Once a week? I don't have the money for that, or the time. I went to my acupuncturist, and the first time they saw me, they booked an hour and a half. An hour and a half, Brandon? It took the full time. I mean, I want to get better, but I have places to go, I have people to see.
Those are legitimate concerns. Having to see your physician frequently can be an investment in both time and money, but it is important to see it as just that, an investment. When you've been feeling under the weather, or want to make an improvement to your health, or even just have severe pain that's been with you for a long time, it's important to think about just how much you're willing to do to reach your health and wellness goals. If you knew that your pain would be reduced by half after 4 treatments, would it be worth it? Money is also a significant concern for any patient. I advise talking to your practitioner either at the first visit or even just over the phone before you decide to officially book your first appointment. Many practitioners have packages they can offer to reduce your out-of-pocket expense when you book multiple sessions at one time.
I swear we'll get back to the appointment tour in a minute, but I have to ask one more question since you brought up expense. Now, I know that the doctor I go to for my annual checkup charges something like $200 per appointment. I know this because every month I get this little report from my insurance company that tells me what charges were made against my account, by whom, and I am an attentive, mindful, well-informed patient who definitely goes out of my way to read and understand the details of my healthcare. Actually, my good lady wife takes care of that for me. My point is, even though the doctor charges $200, I only ever have to pay my copay, which means I'm paying like $20 every time I go to have an appointment. I can afford that. So, Brandon, what's the deal with insurance? I mean, I'm happy to come in every week if all I have to pay is $20.
This is one of the questions I get most frequently when someone is thinking of trying acupuncture. There is, as with everything else we've talked about regarding Chinese medicine, good news and bad news. The good news is that more and more insurance plans are beginning to cover at least a very basic amount of acupuncture cost. Many HSA and Flex accounts also allow their members to use their benefits for acupuncture and other complementary medicines. The bad news is that while availability is growing, not every insurance company and plan has started to include this coverage. The better news: the fact that your practitioner may not be covered by your insurance plan isn't always a bad thing, since most acupuncturists are still working in an out-of-pocket environment. Costs without insurance are usually lower, and many practitioners have much more flexibility when it comes to working within your individual budget. So, have the discussion with your practitioner. I think you'll be pleased with what you find out.
Alright, I promised we'd get back to our virtual tour. So let's say I've done my homework, I've decided to come see you. That's right, I know you can't speak for every practitioner, so I'm coming to see you. And I've made the phone call, booked my appointment. What's next?
The first part of our tour is going to look fairly similar to what you would experience at your Western practitioner's office. There's a fair amount of paperwork I need to make your appointment as efficient and effective as possible, so you can go online at any time and print out the forms to fill out. I have to be honest, the amount of information I need to collect, especially on the first appointment, is a little daunting. So I usually suggest my patients print things out and take their time filling out the forms. As long as you bring the documentation with you on the first day of your appointment, I can significantly shorten your wait time. I still generally ask my patients to come in about 10 minutes early, but you can feel confident that you'll be taken in from the waiting room by your scheduled appointment time, barring emergencies.
So, no more paperwork to fill out? I bring my forms with me and I'm done?
That's what I aim for, certainly.
A likely story. But I'll take you at your word for now. Okay, so, picturing it, now I'm at your office. I've brought this stack of paperwork with me. I've filled in fewer forms to apply for a small business loan, by the way. And I'm still worried because I have no idea what I was supposed to wear. I mean, I've been to massage therapy, Brandon. They asked me to disrobe to my level of comfort. I don't mind taking clothes off if I have to, but I would have liked to know in advance that was the plan. Why didn't you tell me I needed clothes I could easily take off and put on, Brandon?
It's okay. It's okay. Nice deep breaths. For the most part, acupuncture doesn't require patients to take off clothing, besides maybe shoes and socks. Most acupuncturists will request you wear loose-fitting clothing that can be rolled up to the knees and the elbows, and maybe ask you to take your shoes and socks off once you're in the treatment room. But that's it. There are some treatments that need access to areas of your back, your lower legs, or maybe your torso. But I'm always sure to talk to my patients about the treatment plan for the day before I set anything in stone. In other words, if I decide on a course of treatment that you aren't dressed for or feel uncomfortable with, we'll have the chance to discuss your concerns and either work around your wardrobe to accomplish the goals we have, or adjust treatment plans to make sure that both patient and practitioner are comfortable and satisfied.
Okay, that doesn't sound too bad. I was wearing the right clothes this time. You got lucky. And my name was just called by the receptionist. Go on.
You'll be brought back to a private room where the initial interview will take place. The scene will be a familiar one. Table, chairs, various medical paraphernalia that looks vaguely foreign, and some form of reclining massage or examination table or chair. Before any treatment takes place, there will always be an intake. I'll talk with you for a little while, ask some questions, and see how you're feeling and what you're hoping to work on today.
You're capturing it pretty well. I really didn't know what to expect. While I was driving over for my first appointment, my imagination was kind of getting silly with the possibilities. It's just the way my mind works. Would the exam place be all gloomy and mystical? Would there be an exotic receptionist woman? Would you be wearing a silk robe embroidered with ancient script? Would there be some funky incense burning? Would there, in fact, be dim sum? No. It's a medical office. It smells clean. It's very organized. You feel like you're in a professional medical space, because you are. And you are wearing a white doctor coat, because it's all exactly what you would hope for at an examination. But next, if my experience with Western medicine follows, my doctor will look at my chart, ask a few very basic questions, and then quickly decide to treat whatever he thinks is best. 10 minutes tops, in and out, after I've waited to see him for almost an hour.
Fortunately, or unfortunately, if you like quick appointments, acupuncture intake and diagnosis is a little more patient-focused. If you've been to see me before, and you have no new information or complaints or changes to report, intake may take between 5 to 15 minutes. Most practitioners will do more than just listen to what you have to say. At my clinic, patients will either be palpated, and that means various areas of your body will be gently touched and tested, or have their pulses taken.
My pulse gets taken every time I go to my Western doctor, too, at the same time as they're taking my blood pressure. Is that what you mean, just counting the number of beats?
Not exactly, although I'll be getting those details too. One of the primary tools used by Chinese medicine practitioners is called pulse diagnosis. Just like a Western doctor would use a blood test or an EKG, acupuncture physicians can look for certain known qualities and patterns in the pulses of your wrists. They'll often ask you to put your arms out on a soft surface, usually a pillow placed on the desk, and they'll take your pulse for 5 to 10 minutes, while making notes of the sensations that stand out as important or noteworthy.
So my acupuncture physician can tell me my blood glucose just from getting my pulse for a bit, and determine if my headaches are from the skiing accident I just had, or not. Neat. Also, I'd like to see a link to some medical studies on this pulse diagnosis stuff.
I'll make sure to provide a few links. Keep in mind, though, that many of these studies require payments to receive the entire study, and the reading can be a bit dry. And as for your question, pulse diagnosis is a tool like an EKG or a blood test, but the diagnosis your acupuncture physician uses isn't the same as the diagnosis your Western physician might give you. I'll use blood glucose as an example, since you mentioned it. There are sensations on the pulse that, when found in certain amounts and in certain combinations, can be indicative of blood glucose regulation issues. But that's definitely not how Chinese medicine interprets the diagnosis. A patient might be told they have spleen qi deficiency or liver and kidney yin deficiency, but the patient will never, at least from someone who is only licensed in Chinese medicine, be diagnosed with hyperglycemia.
Let me just make sure I understand that, and then we can move on. So you're saying if I come to you and I tell you I've been diagnosed with arthritis, and that's what I want you to treat, you're still going to have to do all this pulse diagnosis and palpation and use words like stagnation and phlegm? Why?
Think of it this way. You take your car to a mechanic. He looks at your vehicle and determines that the problem is with your fuel injectors. They need to be replaced. You decide you want a second opinion, and since your car is an import, you take it to another mechanic who has a lot of experience with your model of car. You explain to this new mechanic that the problem is a faulty fuel injector. That's what you've already been told, but the mechanic doesn't speak fluent English, and after taking a look himself, comes back and tells you that the issue is, well, he uses a series of words you don't know. They're Italian, and fairly specific to the manufacturer of your car. Both mechanics know what they're talking about, and understand the problem, but the descriptions and diagnoses are dependent on the foundation where they come from. So, when you come to your acupuncture physician with a complaint of arthritis, the practitioner still has to do their own tests and diagnoses the problem in terms of Eastern medicine to effectively treat the problem. There's something along the lines of 33 possible root conditions that could play a role in the Western diagnosis of arthritis.
That seems like an awful lot of possible causes for something that has a one-word description. We may have to do an episode about Chinese medical terminology someday, or likely a whole series of them, knowing you. Anyway, we need to get back on track. I know I wore the right clothes. I came in with my paperwork ready. You've done your various diagnosis. Time for needles? Scary needles?
Not just yet. That might be the case if you had come and seen me before, but this is your first treatment, and you have to go through what I call your initial intake. As I've already said, in cases where you're returning to a practitioner you've already seen, intake can take as little as 5 minutes or so. On your first visit, though, well, there's a lot of information to go over. Chinese medicine is often referred to as holistic because it looks at your entire body, systemically and as a whole unit, in order to describe and determine what is wrong. In order to do that, and also to make sure there aren't any critical details being missed, I have to go over the forms you've brought with you and ask for any additional and relevant details related to the information you provided. You'll be asked a wide variety of questions, covering everything from prior surgeries to your most common emotional reactions. And in some cases, the questions I ask may not seem to be directly related to your primary concern. If you have multiple conditions, or if you have a complicated medical history, the intake can be quite lengthy. I always book my initial intake sessions in about 1.5 hour blocks, so you should be prepared for your first appointment to take that entire time, even though it usually doesn't.
An hour and a half? There's no way I can do that. I only get an hour for lunch, and, I have to get from work and then back to work, and I don't want to take time off work just to see my acupuncture physician. You fix it now.
That's fair, I suppose, although I would submit that getting in and out of any Western physician's office in an hour or less is just as unlikely. Most acupuncture physicians understand that people have a limited amount of time to spend in any single appointment. If you know you're going to have to leave at a certain time, make sure your practitioner knows that at the start of the session. I always do my best to adjust my intake process to meet time constraints, within reason. The more information we can go over on this initial visit, the quicker future visits can potentially be.
That sounds reasonable. I gave you all my information the first time, and from then on, all we need to deal with are the new problems. I mean, it sounds like an acupuncture appointment might even give me more attention than most of the Western doctors I've gotten to see recently. Honestly, I'm willing to give up a little more time and feel like my concerns are being heard. My physician is actually dedicating time to looking over all the stuff I wrote down, especially if it leads to me feeling better. So where are we now? You've diagnosed, we've talked about my medical history, all the relevant details. You've spoken to me about what you think is wrong with me. It's needle time, isn't it? Needle time? Pokey pokey jab jab? I've been really nervous about this ever since I booked the appointment. Like nervous but excited. I don't know. Maybe it really works, this stuff. And I'm sitting here getting more and more agitated while we're talking. Why don't we just get the needles in and get it all over with?
Well, it is in fact time for treatment. You'll lie down on a nice comfy massage table, or maybe in a massage chair, or depending on what points we're going to be using, you may even just be asked to stay seated in your nice comfy armchair. And as your practitioner, I'll let you know what clothes need to be moved or removed. Roll up your pant leg, maybe your sleeve. I'll generally give my patients a little rundown of the points I'll be using. Their location, a little information about the goal of some of the points I think are especially important for the day's goals. And then I'll wipe the areas of skin I'll be using with a little rubbing alcohol. The number and placement of needles will vary depending on what conditions we're focusing on and the primary complaints for that day, so I can't give you an estimate. Contrary to what you're likely expecting, acupuncture needles are usually fairly innocuous when inserted, not usually more than just a little slight pinch. And once they've been inserted to the correct depth and then manipulated a little, most people forget that they're there.
So you're gonna leave needles in me while I lay there? I mean, what if I need to sneeze? What if I need to use the restroom?
Simple things like sneezes, small movements, even adjusting how an arm or a leg is situated, not usually a concern. Your practitioner will almost certainly let you know if you need to make sure to keep a particular part of you still. Things like going to the bathroom can be a little trickier. I always tell my patients to use the restroom before we start treatment, but sometimes it can sneak up on you. There are more points than you might think that can be left in place if you need to move. So if you do have to get up, let your practitioner know, and they'll remove needles if they need to.
I've had injections before at my doctor's office, and I have to say, there's no way I would ever forget a needle was inserted. Even that one time I gave blood and they used an IV, I was aware of the needle in my arm, even after I'd been sitting there for 10 minutes. Do you really expect me to believe those needles aren't going to be just as bad? And there may be a bunch of them.
I know we've mentioned some of this on previous episodes, but it still bears repeating, so even compared to an IV needle, which can be fairly thin and is designed to stay inserted for long periods, an acupuncture needle is insubstantial. And while needles you've experienced in your Western doctor's office are hollow, and that's to allow medications to be put in or fluids to be taken out, acupuncture needles are filiform, or solid. You might expect this to make things worse, but in fact, because a hollow needle tears out a small chunk of skin when it's inserted, it's almost always more noticeable than an acupuncture needle. The truth is, many of my patients will actually fall asleep once all the needles are in place.
Let's recap. I come in, I already have the bulk of my paperwork ready to go, I get seen quickly. Okay, yes, not in every case, but I'm coming to see Brendan Weintraub, acupuncture physician extraordinaire. I keep most, if not all of my clothes on, discuss my problems and goals, then lie down, take a quick nap. Well, a nap with needles in, but still, nap. This all sounds pretty good so far.
And that's what I like to hear. Depending on the severity of your problems, or the number of issues being addressed, or the method of treatment chosen, you may have several sets of needles over the course of a treatment. For example, I may insert 6 needles, wait a few minutes, remove them, insert 4 more needles, wait, and then remove those, all in the course of one appointment. There may also be other treatments used before or after needling. Cupping, Tui Na, which is Chinese medical massage, Moxa, a form of heat therapy using herbs, and a variety of other techniques may also be used. Even though acupuncture is primarily associated with needles, your treatment may include a wide variety of things that aren't needles at all.
You know, I'm glad you said that. I've watched dozens of kung fu movies, and when a character's getting treated for their injuries, they're almost always given some magical potion to drink. Their doctor will open up their case, mix a bunch of twigs and berries and some insect parts in a bowl. Pour some water in, and after chugging the whole glass, the patient jumps up full of fire and energy, better than ever and ready to win, like the 6 demon bag from the 1986 epic film Big Trouble in Little China. Are you going to make me drink cockroaches? I mean, yeah, I'd be willing to if it meant I could fly from tree branch to tree branch with grace. But otherwise, no thank you.
Herbal medicine is an integral and important component to Chinese medicine. When you come to see your acupuncture physician, many will want to see you for an appointment or two before seriously considering any herbal formulas. This is because herbs, while less potent than pharmaceuticals, can more easily be tailored to meet the specific needs of each patient. And in order to prescribe the ideal formula, the practitioner will need to establish an understanding of not just the pathogens involved, but also the overall condition of the patient's entire system. Sometimes this is straightforward, and a formula can be prescribed on the first appointment. Other times it may be best to wait a little bit, make sure we've gotten the correct diagnosis before we attempt to add herbals into the equation. Most people are okay with taking a formula. Western medicine relies heavily on prescriptions, so the average patient is okay with taking whatever the physician says is best. I think your concern is probably less about taking a formula than it is about the contents of that formula. Chinese medicine takes ingredients from environments around them and uses them to create remedies, which, let's be frank, can include bugs and animals or all sorts of things. The idea of having to drink a decoction, which is essentially a method of brewing a medicinal tea, having to drink a decoction of bugs and shells doesn't appeal to many people. If you're prescribed an herbal medication, rest assured that modern principles have been applied, and that chances are you can get the formula in a pill or a powder. You can also explain your concerns to your practitioner, and even in cases where a patient is vegan or allergic to shellfish, adjustments can be made. That's one of the nicest things about herbal medicine. Your formula really can be tailored to you.
But just to be clear, no flying powers, though? Healing broken bones with some sticky oil rubbed on the injury? None of that?
Well, there may be some topical ointments, but no magical flight, I'm afraid, and healing will probably still take some time.
No.
Yeah, sorry about that. Still, I think that the overall appointment we've described is pretty nice, even without the powers of flight. Once the needles have all been removed, and you've been prescribed your herbal formula, you'll often be asked to rate any changes or improvements that happen as a result of the treatment, and you'll be asked about it again the next time you visit. It's important to make sure progress is being made.
If you're asking me how I feel right after the treatment is finished, why would you ask me again at the next appointment? I mean, the needles are out. It's not like I'm going to be going home and treating myself again before I see you.
It isn't unusual for a treatment to have its most noticeable effects up to 24 hours after your needles have been removed. That means that even though I asked you how you felt, it might be tomorrow before you really notice changes taking effect. Story time. One of my previous patients had a chronic long-term pain in their knee. It had been present for years. After treatment, there was little reported difference. But almost precisely 24 hours later, I received a phone call from the patient reporting that the pain was completely gone. I won't claim this is an everyday occurrence. Usually, the longer a condition has been present, the longer it takes to resolve. But it just serves to illustrate that checking in with the patient at regular intervals is crucial to ongoing diagnosis and care.
Kind of makes me think of the kung fu movies, where the guy will do the move. Okay, now in 12 hours you will drop dead. Haha.
I think that's actually probably based off of the actual medicine. It's like, okay, this is how it works.
Is that it? It sounds pretty straightforward to me. I assume I schedule and pay now.
Unless you've arranged something else with your acupuncturist, that's it. Make sure to schedule according to your practitioner's advice and follow any additional instructions regarding herbal formulas or lifestyle. But we've just gone over an acupuncture appointment from start to finish.
So here's my final question, which I know will probably end up having a lengthy answer, and you'll just have to deal with it. When I go to my primary care Western physician, I usually don't have to think too much about being prepared for my appointment. I've got my insurance card, my credit card, I arrive on the right day, I'm good to go. Some specialists have more involved requirements. When I've had certain blood tests done, I remember I had to avoid eating for 12 hours before my appointment. It sounds like the treatment process for acupuncture could be a bit more involved. I generally think of an acupuncturist as a specialty, so is there any advice I need to follow to make sure I have a decent appointment?
Well, I'm very glad you brought that up. Following a few basic suggestions can make a world of difference to ensure that you have as effective and enjoyable a treatment as possible. I've actually created a checklist for patients to follow that you can find at my website, originclinics.com. You just go ahead and look for the word more at the top right of the page, and then click Appointment Prep. But I'll go over a few of the more important points for you guys now. Number 1, if possible, try to allow a period of time both before and after your appointment where you avoid extreme stressors. Don't work out heavily just before or just after your appointment, and it may be ideal to have an hour or two set aside for rest and relaxation, especially right after your treatment. Maybe even just a 10-minute nap. Number 2, try not to come to your appointment overly full or excessively hungry. Ideally, you should eat a small meal about an hour or two before your appointment. That said, I would always rather have a patient come in having eaten too recently than to have them skip a meal. If need be, even eating a granola bar 30 minutes before treatment is better than not having eaten at all. And finally, number 3, be ready and willing to be honest and open with your practitioner. Many of the topics you'll discuss with your practitioner might seem personal or mildly embarrassing. It is a rare person who feels comfortable talking about their bowel movements with a complete stranger. But the more open and honest you are, both with your practitioner and with yourself, the more likely you are to have an effective and long-lasting result.
Words to live by. Anything else you want to mention before we wrap it up?
I hope that we've managed to give you all an accurate look into what your experience with acupuncture might look like. There are a multitude of different styles and methods of practice out there, so keep in mind that this might not paint the precise picture for every practitioner out there. As always, and as with any medical provider you see, if you aren't happy with an aspect of your healthcare, make sure to bring up your concerns with your physician. Not every style of practice works for every patient, and it's up to both you and your providers to find out how you can work together to reach the best possible outcome. If you have questions or concerns, it's up to you as a patient to ask your physician directly. Otherwise, they may not know you're not getting the most out of your appointments.
That's all the time we have for today. These are short episodes that provide a brief overview of very complex topics. Everything we say is for entertainment and educational purposes only. Licensed healthcare professionals should advise you and be aware about changes you make to any aspect of your healthcare. Every person's needs are different. The links to references we've made about news articles, medical studies, or other materials can be found at level989.com/health, along with our contact information and the complete Don't Take Medical Advice from Podcasts disclaimer. Thanks for listening, and now go health yourself.